I worked in communities across this country as well as across the world, and we saw people with varying degrees of education levels, with varying degrees of healthcare literacy, all very, very eager to do those at-home COVID tests that I think we can all remember. Large pieces of paper unfolding, putting the contents out on the table, examining it, studying it. Did we do it right? Unlike those really complicated COVID diagnostic tests, this is our technology. So it is about the size of a penny, and it is very simple. It is about the weight of a penny. In fact, I think it might be lighter than a penny. So we have really developed this technology with the end user in mind. This is a patient-centric design. It really is very, very simplistic.
Hello, everyone. We are back with another episode of the Leadership Exchange. I'm your host today. My name is Danny Thompson. I'm the Director of Technology at This.Labs. And today I have an amazing guest with me. I really like the angle of the topic that we're going to be discussing today. Today I have a very special guest with me. I really like the angle and the topic that we're going to be discussing today. I'm with Dr. Stephanie Adams, Director, Intellectual Property and Grants at Micron Biomedical, Inc. Stephanie, thank you so much for joining us. Why don't we do a quick intro, maybe let people at home know who you are and some of the things that you're involved with.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for hosting me today. I'm really excited for this opportunity to share a little bit about myself and Micron. So my name is Stephanie Adams. I have a PhD in molecular biology and then went on to a pretty long career in intellectual property law, representing venture capitalists, pharmaceutical companies, biotech, universities, in really understanding both the business model and the regulatory and the drug development pathway to be able to get a product approved and to be able to protect companies' intellectual property rights in the process. During the pandemic, I was really fortunate to be able to join a nonprofit and completely switch paths into public health for about 5 years during COVID, and was able to really understand the need for different technologies and different interventions to improve our healthcare system, our distribution of drugs and medicines, and to promote both local as well as global health. And then about a year ago, I was given the opportunity to join Micron, and we have a really amazing technology to help with a lot of the issues that we particularly saw during the pandemic. So
you mentioned the issues that you've seen, and at least I have knowledge of this right now that your solution is pretty incredible. There's a lot of questions that I want to ask, but maybe we can give a basic level explanation as to what it is Micron's developed and why you're excited about, among others.
So we're developing a new drug delivery technology that will be an alternative for injectable drugs, and that includes injectable medications as well as vaccines. And this will allow these medications to be delivered simply, painlessly, and conveniently. So we have a particular drug delivery technology that allows self-administration, at-home delivery. It is delivered through the skin, but above the pain receptors. So it's a painless administration, and it's incredibly convenient and simplistic. In addition, it reduces the need for cold chain storage, and again, it reduces or eliminates the need for a skilled healthcare provider to be able to administer the drug or vaccine.
So without a painful injection point, which I think people have come to terms with understanding and thinking about, what specific measures have you, or the company rather, implemented to ensure correct usage and prevent misuse? Which, I mean, that's immediately where my mind immediately goes when I think about people trying to take dosages on their own and things like that, especially with population with varying levels of health literacy.
Absolutely. Women's health, contraceptives, weight loss drugs, pain medications, all of these a lot of times do have to be administered via injection. And so our technology is incredibly simple, and I'll talk more about that in a minute. But in terms of health literacy and people's ability across different communities, to be able to self-administer a technology, we saw that during the COVID pandemic. So COVID testing at home was one of the largest successes in terms of what we learned about public health, administering public health, and people's desire to take charge of their own health and take charge of their own, in that case, diagnosis of whether they had COVID or not. I worked in communities across this country as well as across the world, and we saw people with varying degrees of education levels, with varying degrees of healthcare literacy, all very, very eager to do those at-home COVID tests that I think we can all remember. Large pieces of paper unfolding, putting the contents out on the table, examining it, studying it. Did we do it right? And once we got over that learning curve, all of us independently at home with these boxes, we were all incredibly adept at doing it and really excited about doing it. So much so that at times there were shortages in the at-home tests. We probably all remember that. And I'd be at testing sites with, the lab, the PCR lab truck there, and nobody would be in that line. Everybody would be fighting for that at-home test. So I think at-home administration of diagnostic tests, and now with our technology, soon to be at-home delivery of injectables, is something that is very doable. Unlike those really complicated COVID diagnostic tests, this is our technology. So it is about the size of a penny. And it is very simple. It is about the weight of a penny. In fact, I think it might be lighter than a penny. So we have really developed this technology with the end user in mind. This is a patient-centric design. It really is very, very simplistic. So you would receive your injectable in the form of this drug delivery technology to your home. You would simply remove it from the backing. The drug would be contained on this underside of this delivery technology. You would place it, in this case, on your wrist. And I think you can see there's a little green raised area here.
Yes.
And then there is an adhesive, like a Band-Aid, that just sticks so it doesn't fall off. And then you simply click it. And now the user knows that they've applied enough pressure to allow the projections, the micro projections that come off the back of this device, to be inserted into the skin. You leave it on the skin for a designated period of time. Our technology is designed to be injected within a minute or less. So you would leave it on your skin for about a minute. At this time, there are micro projections off the back of this device that are dissolving into your skin. Again, the microprojections are about 700 microns in length. Our pain receptors start at about 1,200 microns deep into our skin. So this technology is being delivered into my skin, and it is dissolving, and I don't feel the pain. At the end of the minute, I simply remove it. The microprojections will have dissolved into the skin, and so importantly, this is sharps-free waste. For anyone that does injectables at home, they know that they have to be really careful about what they do with the leftover syringe or needle when they're done. They have to make sure it's appropriately, taken care of, and that's a huge hassle. So this is completely sharps-free waste. You don't have to worry about somebody in your home picking it up, accidentally sticking themselves. There's no more micro projection here that they could stick themselves with. It's dissolved, and that's it. And you're done.
That's pretty incredible.
Yes.
Just seeing that, my mind's gone into like 13 different areas of potential questions, and so I think I'll go. That was actually pretty cool. Okay, so let me say it I guess let me ask it like this, because during the pandemic, and my wife and I, of course, we had to get the vaccine, and you go online, and I remember my wife freaking out at the idea of not just a medical professional, but some stranger firefighter injecting her with a needle. The needle phobia was really, really strong at that point. This basically addresses that. I don't know if that was a direct focal point, but my mind immediately went to that, saying, I know tons of people that are terrified of getting a shot.
Yes.
My son, prime example, he has to get a shot literally today and is terrified of the doctor's appointment after school. And so not only, I guess, how does it, addresses that, but like, I guess the bigger point where my mind is going now is, what are some of the other use cases that we could see this potentially being used for? Like, obviously we've talked about education and vaccines, but are there other areas where we see this being used, or I guess making other methods of medicine delivery obsolete after this?
Well, any injectable that is currently, with a needle and syringe, theoretically can be administered through this type of drug delivery technology. Like I said, right now we're really focusing on vaccines. Insulin has been something that has been formulated in this way for this technology. Weight loss drugs, pain medication, women health contraceptives. So really, the possibilities are numerous. And yes, needle phobia is an absolute real event. I saw it myself going to mass vaccination sites in various different communities. We tried different techniques. We really spent a lot of time to put a nice poster on the wall. There was one technology that was actually on Shark Tank that was a little buzzer, and it was an ice pack that buzzed at the same time, and you would put it near the injection site. We brought those to anything to distract people from the idea that they're about to get this shot. Really, most people don't enjoy it, and some people have an aversion or a phobia towards it. Children, infants, toddlers, they soon learn going to their doctor's appointment means getting stuck with a needle, and it really creates stress on parents and on families that have to bring their child in. You get a lollipop after, you're going to get a sticker. So yeah, it really is a game changer. It's incredibly exciting that this technology has been developed. It's incredibly exciting that the scientists at Micron have really developed this to a point where it looks so usable, and really this patient-centric design has been at the center of their efforts for numerous years to make sure that this technology can soon be launched.
The aspect of cold storage, like, to me, like, how does this deal with that? Like, are we keeping this in big freezers and big coolers where it has to be closely monitored? But I know, as we've talked, before recording, how this isn't just a localized solution, but something that you're distributing globally for a variety of reasons that we're going to dive into. How does this deal with that?
So we've touched on convenience, right, and addressing things like needle phobia, which are definite issues in most societies. But then we have the issue of low and middle income countries that really cannot get access to certain injectable drugs and vaccines because of the supply chain, the logistics in getting these types of medications into remote areas in different parts of the world, never mind remote areas that economically have a barrier as well. And so this technology eliminates extreme cold chain storage. What we saw with the negative 80 degrees during the pandemic, that would not happen with this type of technology. Depending on the drug or the medicine, it will have different storage requirements, but what we generally see is storage between room temperature, refrigerated. That's really where this technology is headed, so that depending again on the particular drug that's incorporated in the technology, it may have its own specific criteria. We are very active in the measles rubella space. We've been very fortunate to have funding from the Gates Foundation for a large number of years, and so this technology is already being delivered in parts of Africa as part of clinical studies where we're already saving lives. If you would think that the people enrolled in our studies and the children enrolled in our studies would not have had access to a vaccine hadn't it been for our trial and our study, and that's been really exciting. We published for the first time this drug delivery technology in infants as young as 9 months old. We published that last year in The Lancet, which is a very well-recognized medical journal, and we saw all the appropriate scientific benchmarks in terms of getting the right coverage from that measles and rubella vaccine in those infants as young as 9 months old. We also like to do surveys of our the caregivers, the adults that are in our clinical trials to see what they think about it, because that's so important. And what I learned during the pandemic is we don't want to push a new technology on a community unless they're really willing to accept it. And we want their feedback. That's why we spent so much on this design of this particular technology, because we want it to be, but just because we think it's easy doesn't mean that the community that we're going into thinks it's easy. And so we do surveys of the people in our trial, and resoundingly, they accepted this technology. They preferred it by more than 95% to traditional injection. The parents were just thrilled to be able to offer this to their toddlers and their infants as an alternative to traditional injection. And so we are very, very cognizant of the promise of this technology, but also of listening to communities and getting feedback early on so that we can improve if we need to.
So with that, my mind now thinks about one thing in particular. Number one, you're building like a world-class solution here, right? Something that, regardless of medical history or literacy, you're able to kind of implement this solution. But this has to come with some kind of educational aspect to educate the masses in order, not just for the usage, but the implementation, or even knowing that it exists. Like, are these considerations that you're taking into this? And if so, like, what is some of the thoughts around that when we think of like developing world countries figuring this out, because they may not necessarily have access to all the resources in order to know that this is a thing?
Well, that's really, and again, with funding from the Gates Foundation and our other funders, that's what we're able to do. And really, the second part of all of this is access, is being able to envision a world where we can get life-saving measures out to all communities. And I think that the communities that we worked in so far understand this. I think that by working in those communities now during the clinical trial stage, we're introducing it and we're allowing them to hear about it. But as you reacted to it, it is pretty much a game changer. And so we're very excited by people's innate reactions. And scientifically, the data is very strong that it is at least as effective as traditional administration of drugs and vaccines. So, we're just really excited about it, and opportunities like this to talk to people and to spread the word is what we're trying to do a lot of, and really, allow people to understand that there are, new technologies and really exciting technologies on the horizon to improve health locally and globally. So,
especially with your role being, IP and grants, one thing that I'm wondering here is, and I'm a software engineer by trade, right? So that's a big part of my background, is scaling very large organizations and businesses and growing pains. And so one thing that I'm constantly thinking about, especially in relation to the conversation that we're having now, is protecting intellectual property is obviously like a very big deal for innovation, right? And you're doing something that's, to a certain degree, hasn't really been done at the level that you're doing it. But it can also sometimes hinder access to low-income countries. It can hinder access to delivery strategies and things like that. How are you balancing Micron, how are they balancing their IP strategy with the goal of making this accessible for all, especially like underserved populations?
So we have really thought about that as a mission-driven company. So we are a mission-driven company that we are for-profit, but we are also driven by this mission to improve global health. So we've carefully balanced, what you're talking about in terms of our intellectual property portfolio, which exists, which is very strong, with really how we're going to distribute that. And we do have a very feasible and workable strategy that kind of goes beyond this webinar to address those needs. In addition, I think, again, going back to the design and the simplicity of this technology, we are making sure that the cost of goods will be relatively low on the global scale, and that's incredibly important to consider as we scale up commercial manufacturing to be ready for product launch. We had to make sure that this device was not cost prohibitive across the globe, and we did that in our design.
I absolutely love that. I think that's fantastic. Well, with it also being a for-profit institute and being mission-driven, how are you ensuring? Like, are there certain processes in place to ensure that after a certain scale is met and certain financial goals are met by the organization, that down the road this doesn't pivot into a different area where now the dollar signs and shareholders become the target or focal point of like conversation, like especially being mission driven with certain countries and continents in mind. Like, how is that mission driving that conversation going forward?
It's central to who we work with, who we partner with. It's central to who we hire. It's central to who invests in our company. So we'll be a commercial company. We will make profits in the appropriate locations of the globe for this technology, but we will also make sure that global access is achieved, and we've done that through our funding model and our investor model, and we plan to stay true to that as things progress.
I love that. And so, as you're growing, right? Like, growth is always tough. Regardless of organizational size, or if we're being honest, industry, it's always a difficult thing because you're experiencing things in real time that you probably would never really experience outside of that. And so what are some of these considerations that you're taking in, especially like you said, we're not starting locally, we're taking the whole world by storm with this one. So it's like, what are some of those growing pains that you've experienced so far? How are ways that you're navigating this? Especially some of the growing pains my mind immediately goes to is like logistical things in regards to like global distribution.
Absolutely, and that's been front and center as well, especially recently. So this technology is brand new. Nobody's done this before, which means nobody's actually manufactured this at scale before. And so the past few years, the investments that we've gotten and the focus of our company has been to invent ways to commercially scale this technology, again, at a price point that is viable for multiple different communities and multiple different places globally. And so that has really been a challenge that we have now resolved. We have a commercially scale pilot line and the equipment ready, and so now we're ready to begin to place that equipment in the appropriate factories so that we can start producing vaccine at scale. In particular, measles and rubella is one of our lead programs, but we have multiple other programs with private pharmaceutical companies and other organizations that are also on track to be able to use this newly invented and newly created technology to be able to manufacture this type of technology at scale and be ready for commercial production.
Well, what are some things that you're doing, or how are you navigating the regulatory market in this? Because there's just so many different tangents where you can get bottlenecked or held up forever. I know, during the pandemic, they made very extreme moves to kind of accelerate that. But for the vast majority of medications, it takes so much longer to go through that process. Like, how are you navigating that?
We have really design in mind when we do that as well. So the way that we formulate these microprojections is with excipients. It's a fancy word to say, other additives, other parts of the formulation that are already approved by the US FDA for injection. So we don't use anything new to be able to formulate these medicines and vaccines within our technology, and that's really been helpful with regulatory agencies so that it's not something, again, foreign or new that's being administered into somebody's body. Everything that we're using in this technology has been FDA approved, and then if the active has also been approved by regulatory bodies, then you're really just combining two things that are known and into a new technology to deliver it.
So, I guess I would kind of pivot this a little bit. I know during the pandemic is when you really made this move into Micron and this current position as a whole. I guess, what inspired you even to make that move? What was part of the reason for going this direction?
It was very organic. From a young age, I wanted to get into science and medicine, and at one point I thought I was going to medical school. I really, really wanted to make a difference in health. That was something that has motivated me from a young age. When the pandemic hit and I was given the opportunity to join a nonprofit to to face this unbelievable event that was happening in my lifetime, I was just so excited at that possibility. I honestly, I thought, that was just such a fortunate opportunity that I was given in Atlanta to be able to join that global health team. And so I took advantage of it and took a little bit of a risk by jumping careers a little bit. But it was so rewarding. It allowed me to grow as a leader, to really understand how you can lead through listening, through being responsive to people's concern, to paying attention and providing accurate information. Scientists were really put at the forefront during the pandemic to be able to explain really complicated technology to communities all over the world, all over our country, that really hadn't thought about science, didn't have that literacy, was not something that was part of their daily lives, and we had a very pivotal role to be able to do that. So just very fortunate that I was able to have the courage to make that jump. And then that brought me, to Micron. Literally a few years into the pandemic, I met our CEO, Steve, and we were talking about it, and it was one of the first times that we could all kind of come together again as a biotech community. And I said, what are you up to? What's going on? And he had this device in his pocket, and I said, oh my gosh, could you imagine if we had that at the outset of the pandemic and how that would look different? And, I really was not in that biotech world at all. I was purely in public health, community health role at that point. And when he took this technology out of his pocket and showed it to me, it was incredibly exciting.
Especially with this being mission driven, and I know it's a big part of who you are and your mission as well. What drives your passion for expanding access to healthcare in low and middle income countries? And how does this influence your daily work at Micron in general?
I think that we really attract leaders that are passionate and really devoted to this idea. We are very focused on cultivating that in terms of our corporate culture, and it's just been, I saw on the front lines the destruction of a virus. I know that how quickly viruses and other diseases can spread across the globe, and how destructive they can be to everybody. So protecting our global health for a multitude of reasons is in our best interest.
And I guess, my last major question on this one is, what advice would you give to anybody that's trying to navigate the career in this space, whether it's trying to grow within the healthcare industry as a whole, or maybe even going a similar path as you did with an organization similar to Micron?
I think really, it's to do the research, understand the technology, understand where your passions lie, and also understand where your talents lie. I'm incredibly passionate about this space. My talents lie in intellectual property and grants, and I was able to bring those talents into this role at a company that is able to achieve amazing technology to improve what I'm passionate about, which is global health. So think of creative ways outside the box to be able to really, keep your career successful in your mind and keep your career aligned with your passions as well as your talents. And that allows you also to be able to contribute to your team in a way that lets you think outside the box, think in different ways. Being teamed with a bunch of engineers, I've never worked with engineers before. It's amazing to bring those collaborative skills together. And again, really aligning your passions and your talents is what I think is most critical for at least me to be able to be satisfied and successful in my career.
Well, I guess when looking back and reflecting on your career, has there been a specific moment that you've been particularly satisfied with, a certain decision that went in the way that you wanted it to?
Yes, like I've said, really joining that nonprofit at the outset of the pandemic was transformational for my career, and also just incredibly rewarding. We had no idea what we were facing. We literally opened our doors in March of 2020 and worked very closely with international and federal agencies to respond to the pandemic on the ground. And that was just life-changing in terms of what I was able to witness, what we were able to do, how we were able to, again, work with so many different communities eventually our work really became US focused and really understanding issues with access that could benefit from a technology like this, but also understanding people in various different communities across our country and their desire, to improve their health, their desire to really learn, their desire to understand what are the interventions that we're suggesting, why, what is the data behind that, and being able to explain that to community leaders and people in communities was really transformational for me.
Well, folks, that's all the time that we have for this one. I want to give a special shout out to the reason why we don't have ads during this podcast. This episode is probably sponsored by This.Labs. We do it ourselves. And so your partner in modern web development and consulting. At This.Labs, we specialize in empowering businesses to reach their full potential through technology. We understand that in today's fast-paced tech environment, adaptability and efficiency are crucial. That's why we offer tailored solutions designed to meet your unique challenges and objectives, and our commitment to excellence and client success sets us apart as a trusted advisor in the industry. Our expertise extends to the healthcare sector with clients such as Moderna, Novartis, CVS Health, and Gen X. And we've collaborated with organizations to develop secure, scalable, and user-friendly digital solutions. By leveraging modern web technologies, we've helped healthcare providers enhance patient engagement, streamline operations, and improve overall care delivery. If you're interested, check out this.co. One last time, this.co to find out more. Thank you to This.Labs, and thank you so much, Dr. Stephanie Adams, for spending some time with us.
Thank you so much for this opportunity. It's been wonderful. I really appreciate it.
All right, y'all. We'll see you on the next one. Goodbye, everybody.